Welcome. It's the Daily Objective. Jonathan Hoenig with you and our viewers, listeners all around the world. This is a presentation of the Ayn Rand Center UK. But as I said, we welcome a global community of objectivists, people interested in Ayn Rand, in ideas and critical thinking, in taking life seriously and living a better life and living a happier life. So we're happy to have you with us, and both on the super chat as well. Thank you, Marilyn, who's already gotten the party started, and I hope to inspire you for some more super chats and perhaps even some memberships, because we have a really interesting, I hope a little different, there's an informal competition between those of us, the daily hosts here, kind of putting on a show, if you will. So I think I have something pretty exciting for you today. It's a little bit ripped from the headlines, but obviously also incorporates a lot of Miss Rand's, I believe, a lot of Miss Rand's philosophy, or at least my interpretation of it. So I want to see your discussion on Super Chat as well. And then, of course, after, we're going to have a clubhouse. But let's get right to it with your permission. And of course, when I'm concerned, there's always a good slideshow. I'm told that men and women are visually stimulated, so we've got the ubiquitous PowerPoint, but I think it's a good one. So the title of the presentation today: There Are No White Lies, Holden Caulfield. There are no white lies, Holden Caulfield. Now, obviously, this is not objectivism. This is not representing objectivism. I don't represent Miss Rand, Dr. Peikoff. Read them to learn about objectivism. This is my own, if you will, song and dance interpretation of some of these ideas. And I have to give a lot of credit to Bloomberg, in particular, Bryn Jonathan Butler, who wrote an article on what most of this is based. So let's start by talking about J.D. Salinger. J.D. Salinger is now deceased. He was an author, lived 1919 to 2010, lived quite a long life. And he is probably best known as, for those of you who don't know, the author of The Catcher in the Rye, which was published back in 1951, was and is a huge, huge mega seller. I mean, it sold 65 million copies. That's probably even more than Atlas Shrugged, if you can believe it, although it was published a few years earlier. It still, to this day, sells 250,000 copies a year, almost 700 copies a day. So it is still a huge bestseller. Thank you, Sammy, for that contribution. And the kind of interesting story, I've read Catcher in the Rye, I've never read it. I find it to be a very boring, dreary book. But what's so interesting about Salinger is that after publication of the book, and there's been a lot written about this, he became a real recluse. This was him before, and this is him after. And basically, he was unseen for decades. He became a real recluse. This is from Bloomberg, the author of Catcher in the Rye, the Bible of 4 generations of disaffected youth. He turned his back on the public in 1953. And basically, I don't want to say went into hiding, but he left public life. And he was really rarely seen, gave no interviews for years and years and years, for decades. He just disappeared. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. In 1980, a young woman by the name of Betty Epps, and we see her there, a young woman named Betty Epps, that's her photo. She wrote J.D. Salinger. This is again from the Bloomberg article. In a letter to him, she described herself. She was a journalist. She worked at some paper in the South, I believe. She described herself, though, not as a journalist, but as a novelist, tall with green hair and red gold hair. She said, who had no intention of usurping any of your privacy. She said there were no phones in the hotel where she was staying, and suggested that she and Salinger meet the next day at an ice cream parlor. She had presented herself that I'm a novelist. I want to talk to you about writing a novel. Let's just get together and talk. So this is the important part. She said, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a novelist. There's no phones, no hitch. I just want to talk with you. Now, here's where it even gets more interesting. What she didn't tell Salinger was that she had a Sony recorder, a tape recorder, one of those little mini recorders back from the 80s, stuffed under the sleeve of her blouse. So she snuck in a recording device to tape J.D. Salinger, tape this conversation she was going to have with him. She recorded 27 minutes of that conversation. It is the only known recording of J.D. Salinger's voice. It has not been heard since. It hasn't been heard since 1980. It's been so. This is pretty rare. I mean, there is no recording of J.D. Salinger's voice. He is arguably one of the best-selling authors of the 20th and now even into the 21st century. And she's been offered huge amounts of money over the time for this. In fact, she was offered $500,000 cash. Just give me the tape, $500,000 cash. She has turned all the offers down. And they've gone back now and they've talked to Betty Epps about this. And it turns out that despite having now, this huge windfall, potentially huge windfall, here we are in 2021, what, 50 some years later, 40 years later, she regrets it. She regrets it terribly. That's her own words. This is from the Bloomberg article. In the years after I did that, I came to regret it terribly, terribly. I've spent many, 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 many hours a day thinking about this. Think about this. She spent many, many, many hours a day thinking about this. And of course, it means an awful lot to me. She says, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I think, I stole that. I stole his voice. So think about it. She is thinking about it for hours a day. She, even now, decades later, wakes up in the middle of the night, haunted. I stole that. I stole his voice. She continues, it's like stealing someone's soul, right? The tape is not mine to give or sell. So, she thought she was this enterprising young reporter and was going to be a little tricky and lie and get this amazing value, but it haunted her. She didn't get anything. What she got was decades and decades of regret of being haunted by this. And it made me, of course, think of Miss Rand and her novel Atlas Shrugged, of which is, was actually written in 1957. So it was published, 6 years after Catcher in the Rye, but she started it. I don't know when Salinger started Catcher in the Rye, but Miss Rand obviously started it, I believe 12 years earlier than 1957. But needless to say, there's so many amazing gems in Atlas Shrugged, and one of which is this idea about lying to get a value. Miss Rand writes, people think that a liar gains a victory over his victim. What I've learned is that a lie is an act of self-abdication because one surrenders one reality to the person to whom one lies, making that person one's master, condemning oneself from then on to faking the sort of reality that person's view requires to be faked. So it made me think of that. She thought she was pulling one over on J.D. Salinger, but she made J.D. Salinger, who she never saw again, her master. She condemned herself to this lifetime of regret, this lifetime. The man, Miss Rand continues, the man who lies to the world is the world's slave from then on. So it just made me think of her. She thought she was pulling a fast one. She thought she was getting this great value. She was going to hide the tape recorder. A little white lie, right? Who's it hurting? Miss Rand writes, there are no white lies. There's only the blackest of destruction. And a white lie is the blackest of them all. So kind of like when I read about the story about this woman and Salinger and thought of this line from Miss Rand, it was this little white lie for her. And it ended up really, I don't want to oversell it, ruining her life, but haunting her life for years and years. And she got nothing out of it. She couldn't even sell it. Marilyn says, so burn the tape. Well, we're getting to that. In fact, Marilyn, that's what she has promised. She has said she is going to cremate the tape with her. It is going to go to the grave with her. Miss Rand writes, this is from Return to the Primitive. Kind of gets us back to this idea of lying to achieve a value and why, lying is not a good means. It's not a way to achieve anything. Self-esteem is reliant on one's power to think. It can't be replaced on one's power to deceive. So even after she got it, she couldn't even feel really good about it because she couldn't go around saying like, yeah, I met J.D. Salinger. He really liked me, so he let me have the interview. She had to always be deceiving about her. And so the success of a man who deals with reality augments his self-confidence. The success of a con man augments his panic. And that is exactly what this woman, Betty Epps, achieved. A lifetime of thinking about this every day and waking up in the middle of the night panicked about it. That is not a happy life. So we want to talk a bit more about this. And here are some, as they say, points for discussion. evasion, I think, is something that hits home pretty hard with this. I mean, she thought she was going to be able to kind of evade reality here. Oh, question of self-esteem. She thought she was going to get this amazing scoop and be a hero. Get the world's attention as getting the one scoop on J.D. Salinger, put one over on him, and also this idea of the desire for the unearned. She didn't earn it. She wanted to fake reality to get it, and why that's a real losing mentality. So join us on Clubhouse in just a few minutes. I want to once again thank, I don't know him, but I'll just give him thanks and encourage you to visit Bloomberg and visit Bryn Jonathan Butler's work. Follow him at BRINICIO on Twitter, etc. And become a member if you like what we're doing here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. Some interesting interpretations of Miss Rand's work and applied to today's world. It's Miss Rand talks about it's a philosophy for living on Earth. And if you read Atlas Shrugged, what you quickly find is that you see people all around you that say, "Oh, this reminds me of this." So it's a great value if you pick it up and read it, because you'll see so much that brings you value here in the real world. So become a member, join us, join our posse, and join us on Clubhouse. And I want to thank all of our super chatters. And this is your last opportunity. We always say, show the love with your dollars. It's a way of not being a freeloader. And let me just say, Rucka, who oftentimes has a potty mouth, I'm just going to say it, Rucka raises a lot more money than I do here. Thank you, Mary Aline. Thank you, Sammy is bored again. I've since subsequently learned that she's not bored. Thank you, Robert, who's got a tremendous following here on his shows on the Ayn Rand Center UK. Robert Nasser, Living on Earth. I think that's it. It's really good, though. I've caught it a few times. Robert says, strangely enough, nice lies are in fact lies, right? So you tell yourself, oh, it's just a white lie. And Dr. Brooke talks about this as well. Just one of the practical problems with a lie is then you have to then tell that lie to the next person. And now who did I tell the lie to? Who do I not tell the lie to? So, Dr. Brooke talks about lies are just not a good way of living. It's not a really practical way of living. But this story I really like too, because it emphasized the fact that it haunts you. It haunts you, and you can't have any self-esteem because of it. Thanks, Enric. Enric is part of our esteemed posse. I always love hearing from him. He says, when I filmed or videoed and the person asked it destroyed, I did that. That she hadn't burned it indicates something else is going on for her, perhaps wanting the attention. I have to say, I do agree with that. She could have just gotten rid of it and never said anything about it. I don't know if there's a little backstory perhaps I'm missing, but you're right. she's giving interviews, so there's a little bit of a tease involved with that. But I do believe her that she's been haunted by it. Maybe she's telling the story as kind of a kind of warning sign. For me, it's a real warning sign that you don't get anything. It's like you rob that bank and you've got your $1 million, whatever it is. You're always looking over your shoulder. You're always haunted by it. You can't fake reality. It's part of what makes, any of these books. And I go back to some of the early stuff, the Objectivist, go back to, there's just such a wealth of objectivism that's been written both in the last 10, 15, 20 years and back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So immerse yourself in that and let us be your guide here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. I wouldn't say your guide necessarily, but your friend, your buddy, your posse. Become part of our community, become a member. You get access to people like Don Watkins, James Valiant, and Chico Calela, Mark Pellegrino, Rucka Ali. These are really interesting people from all walks of life who are, using and living objectivism to live a better life. So that's what it's all about. So thanks for making us part of your posse and posse. I think a posse is like a bossy posse. And join us on Clubhouse in just a few minutes. And by us, I mean me. Thank you, Robert. More dollars for Jonathan. Well, thank you so much. And more dollars for Ayn Rand Center UK. I'm just saying, it's like y'all sent $40 to Netflix and $10 to Hulu and this. And so, we are a very small operation trying to keep the lights on, if you will, bring you these interesting speakers and programs from all over the world. So thank you from the UK. What is it? About 7:15 there. Now you're already probably on your third or fourth pint. Just kidding. We're all laughing. It's just getting along. Truly, though, I look forward to seeing you on Clubhouse and to seeing you back here again. So from Jonathan and all of us here at the Ayn Rand Center UK, see you soon.
Thank you.